There are pains that aren't screamed. They hide behind smiles, are silenced with excuses, and one of the most invisible and most devastating is feeling like someone is playing with your emotions, making you doubt yourself and convincing you that you're the problem. Because that's what emotional manipulation does. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't strike, it confuses. It doesn't lock you in a cage, but makes you afraid to step out. It looks you in the eye and tells you you're overreacting, that you misunderstood, that everything you do is wrong, and you end up apologizing for feeling. It can come from a partner, a parent, a friend, a boss, someone who says they love you but needs you to shrink so they can feel big. Someone who disguises control as concern, who uses your fears, your wounds, your desire to love as tools to keep you close. And little by little, you start losing yourself. First, you stop saying certain things, then you get used to giving in. Soon, you even filter your thoughts before you think them. And one day, you wake up with no voice, no will, no clear memory of who you were before all of this. Emotional manipulation doesn't show, but it burns you from the inside. And it leaves a scar that's hard to name, the scar of having allowed someone to hold power over your essence. If you're here, maybe you already feel it. Maybe you're living it. Maybe you've known for a while that something isn't right, but you don't know how to explain it. You feel guilty for wanting to breathe. You feel selfish for needing boundaries. Your soul hurts, and you're not sure if you're overreacting or finally waking up. So listen closely. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. And you don't deserve to live like this. Manipulation only works when doubt and love are tangled, and your first step to freedom isn't cutting ties with that person. It's breaking the inner narrative that tells you you're being bad for wanting peace. Because there is no real love where there is fear, no care where there is blackmail, no respect where you have to justify yourself constantly just to avoid being abandoned. Marcus Aurelius said, "Happiness depends on yourself, not on what others do or say." But for that to be real, you need to reclaim your center, relearn how to listen to yourself. Remember that your dignity is non-negotiable, that your boundaries are not disrespectful, that you deserve relationships where you don't have to defend yourself all the time. This session doesn't come with easy answers. There are no magic phrases or instant solutions, but there is one powerful truth that can change everything. No one can manipulate your soul without your permission, and even if it seems hard now, even if fear is still whispering in your ear, a spark has already been lit inside you. A voice that says, "Enough, no more. Today I begin to return to myself." That's what we're going to do together here. This Stoic session is a refuge for those who've been used emotionally, but also an awakening for those ready to reclaim their power. Yes, we're going to touch the depths, but not to stay there. We'll come out stronger, wiser, freer. Because Stoicism is not coldness, it's fire that forges character. It's clarity that cuts through invisible chains. It's courage to choose yourself, even when it hurts. You're about to face what's been keeping you tied, and to remember something you might have forgotten. You were not born to be an emotional puppet. You were born to walk with strength, with voice, with composure, with soul. And today, here, your return begins. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by commenting, "From today on, I reclaim control of my life." That phrase will be your anchor when fear tries to drag you back again, a reminder that you're here to break the chains of emotional manipulation, not to keep handing over your power. This session is your sign. Your dignity, your voice, and your peace are no longer up for sale. It's time to reclaim what has always been yours, your inner freedom. Let's begin. Stoic Lesson 1. No one can manipulate you without your permission. For a long time, you believed the problem was the other person, their attitude, their emotional blackmail, their calculated silences. You thought manipulation came from the outside, like an unexpected storm that swept away your peace. But today, this Stoic lesson is going to hit you with a truth that, while painful at first, can set you free forever. No one can manipulate you without your consent. Yes, you read that right. Manipulation doesn't begin with the other person. It begins within you, in your need for approval, in your fear of conflict, in your urgency to feel loved, useful, needed, in your emotional void, one the other person learned to exploit. Epictetus taught that we do not suffer from what is done to us, but from the meaning we assign to it. The other person's words hold no power until you choose to give them weight. Emotional blackmail is ineffective unless you give in. Silence has no control unless you become desperate to fill it. But this isn't about blaming yourself, it's about waking up. When you've lived surrounded by manipulators, it's natural that your emotional system has learned to survive by pleasing, that your identity was shaped around avoiding conflict, soothing others, and not making waves. But that programming, even if it once protected you, is now destroying you. It has become the poison that keeps you from being free. And this is where Stoicism becomes a radical tool for liberation. Because this philosophy doesn't ask you to control others, it teaches you to reclaim control over the only thing that truly belongs to you, your mind, your emotions, your will. Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we have about them." And you've been living under the belief that love must be earned through submission, that affection is won by giving in, that another person's silence is a debt you must repay with explanations. But not anymore. Today you decide that your peace is no longer in anyone else's hands, that your identity doesn't depend on how much someone likes you, that your dignity is not up for negotiation. And that simple act of awareness is the beginning of your emotional emancipation. Do you see it now? The manipulator loses power when you stop responding the way they expect, when you break the pattern, when you choose to think, feel, and act from reason, not from your wounds. When you declare that your worth is non-negotiable, your presence doesn't beg, your love can't be bargained. Maybe you're already recalling concrete moments. That partner who punished you with silence, that friend who made you feel guilty every time you didn't do what they wanted, that family member who could make you feel selfish, ungrateful, and not enough with just one sentence. But today, the focus is no longer on them, it's on you. Because manipulation only thrives where unresolved emotional needs exist. And your Stoic task is this: resolve them, not by filling them with people, but through self-knowledge, not by depending on someone else for peace, but by learning to be with yourself without begging for validation. Marcus Aurelius explained it with brutal clarity. The soul becomes invincible once it stops being afraid. And today, you decide to stop fearing abandonment, judgment, and rejection. Because when you're no longer afraid of being alone, of not being liked, of saying no with firmness, manipulation simply dissolves. It's not that the world suddenly becomes fair, it's that you stop being manipulable, because you've reclaimed the power that was always yours, because you've realized that the pain of manipulation doesn't come from the other person's actions, but from your unconscious surrender. And that today, with this new awareness, you can cut the invisible strings that once controlled you. So ask yourself this Stoic question every time you feel someone trying to manipulate you. What part of me still believes I need to give in to be loved? That's the key. That's the root. And when you work on it with patience, with honesty, with courage, something powerful happens. You stop being a victim of other people's emotional strategies and become the master of your inner world. Because in the end, as Epictetus taught, real power doesn't come from changing others. It comes from no longer being a slave to what they do, and you, right now, are already on that path. Stoic Lesson 2. Manipulation reveals their insecurities, not yours. For a long time, you believed the problem was you, that something in you triggered those hurtful behaviors, those misplaced guilts, those emotional blackmails that made you question your worth. But no. Emotional manipulation rarely speaks about the victim. It speaks about the unmet needs of the manipulator. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What others do says more about them than about you." This seemingly simple phrase is a sword that severs the burden of guilt you were never meant to carry. Because when someone needs to manipulate you in order to get your attention, your affection, or your obedience, they're not showing strength, they're showing lack. The manipulator is not strong. They are someone who doesn't know how to ask without demanding, who doesn't know how to receive without controlling. Someone who, likely shaped by their own wounds, learned that love is earned through fear, that affection is maintained through power, and that a bond is only real if the other person is willing to surrender their emotional freedom. And you, having been the target of that, have no reason to carry the consequences of their distorted ways of relating. Stoicism doesn't ask you to demonize others, but it does require you to open your eyes, to see the game behind the polite gesture, the threat behind the smile, the manipulation hidden inside every "do it for me." Because those who manipulate don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they play the victim. Sometimes they make you feel guilty for things you never did, for emotions you can't control, for choices that were never yours to begin with. And that's where the first great Stoic defense comes into play: discernment. The ability to observe without absorbing. To clearly see that other people's insecurities are not your mirror, that their need for control is not your responsibility, that their fear of losing you does not justify their attempts to erase you. Epictetus would have said it like this: if someone needs to diminish you to feel in control, they are lost. But you are even more lost if you don't recognize it, because those who fail to see the manipulation surrounding them become involuntary accomplices in their own emotional captivity. It's not easy to accept that someone close is manipulating you. It hurts, because we're often talking about parents, partners, lifelong friends. You don't want to see them that way. You don't want to believe that what's harming you is intentional. And often it isn't, but that doesn't make it any less harmful. Compassion should never be confused with blindness. Recognizing someone's emotional lack doesn't mean letting them drag you down with it. You can see their pain and still protect yourself. You can understand their story and still refuse to let it rewrite yours. You can be empathetic and still preserve your peace. And when you do, when you stop taking manipulation personally, something liberating happens. You realize you no longer have to interpret every phrase as a dagger aimed at you. You learn to step back emotionally, to observe with clarity, and to return the emotional weight to where it belongs, outside of you. The manipulator's insecurity won't heal through your blind surrender. It won't fade with your silence. It will only grow if you don't draw a line. And the first line must be drawn within. Stop accepting as truth the things someone says just to make you feel small. You're selfish. If you love me, you would. You always do this. You make me feel terrible. Statements like these are crafted to make you believe you're the problem, but you're not. Not if you're protecting your well-being. Not if you're saying enough. Not if you're choosing dignity over manipulation disguised as love. Marcus Aurelius also warned, do not let yourself be contaminated by the emotions of others. Because the manipulator isn't trying to share their feelings with you. They're trying to plant their wounds in you without ever owning them. They want you to carry their fear as guilt, their anger as duty, their emptiness as obligation. But you are not here to be anyone's emotional dumping ground. You are here to build your life with strength, with freedom, and with clarity about who you are and what you deserve. And you deserve it all, but not at any cost. So the next time someone tries to manipulate you with their silence, their anger, their passive-aggressive behavior, their veiled threats, or their poisoned words, stop, breathe, and remember, this is not about you. It's about their own chains. Your task as a Stoic is not to break their chains for them. It's to make sure they don't drag you down with them. Because your peace doesn't lie in changing the behavior of a manipulator. It lies in freeing yourself from the need to please at the expense of your truth. And when you do that, truth truly do it, you reclaim something no manipulator can ever take from you again, your inner power. Your emotional freedom is a right. If today you choose to stop being manipulated, subscribe. This session is for those who are ready to say enough, to reclaim their voice, their dignity, and their inner peace. We are not here to appease those who control us. We are here to grow strong and live with integrity. Don't let fear keep making decisions for you. We continue. Stoic Lesson 3. Define your boundaries clearly. Do you know why so many people are manipulated without even realizing it? Because they never learned how to say no with conviction, because they grew up believing that setting boundaries was selfish, that the right thing to do was to give in, to please, to avoid conflict at all costs. And so, they gave away pieces of themselves in the name of false harmony, until one day they no longer knew who they were without the approval of others. Seneca, one of Stoicism's great sages, said it plainly: "He who does not command himself will be commanded by others." And that phrase, though short, carries an uncomfortable truth. If you don't set your own boundaries, someone else will set them for you, and they'll do it for their own convenience, not your well-being. Most manipulators don't use shouting or threats. Their favorite weapon is subtlety. They ask you for a small favor you don't want to do. They make you feel guilty for needing space. They wrap their demands in sweet talk disguised as affection. And if you lack internal clarity, you give in. You give in once, then again and again, until living to please becomes your default. Stoicism teaches that setting boundaries is not an act of aggression, it's an act of respect. It is the clearest way to protect your time, your energy, and your peace of mind. A boundary is not a wall that shuts everyone out. It is a well-guarded door that decides who enters, when, and under what conditions. And this is where many people fail, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of disappointing, fear of rejection, fear that someone special might leave if we speak our truth. But anything or anyone that only stays if you betray your values was never really yours to begin with. A healthy relationship, whether it's family, romantic, work, or friendship, does not break because of a healthy boundary. It breaks when one person gives and gives until they're empty and then starts resenting the other for taking what they never dared to deny. Picture it this way: every time you say yes to something you don't want, you're saying no to yourself. You're feeding a dynamic where the other person learns that your discomfort is negotiable, that your love always comes with self-sacrifice. And what happens when that dynamic repeats for too long? You disappear. You become a diluted version of yourself. You silence your needs. You justify the unjustifiable. You smile when you want to cry. And the manipulator grows stronger in that confusion, in that void of boundaries you helped create. But not all is lost. Because the day you decide to set a boundary, a real one, without loopholes or unnecessary apologies, something changes. Maybe the other person gets angry. Maybe they try to manipulate you even more. Maybe they accuse you of being cold, selfish, distant. But that reaction is not your burden. It's a reflection of their discomfort with your awakening. And no, you don't have to yell to set a boundary. In fact, the most powerful boundaries are spoken softly. I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not available right now. That doesn't work for me. I don't want to continue this conversation. That no, plain and unadorned, is a declaration of power. It's the moment you stop begging for understanding and begin exercising sovereignty over your life. It's not about being rigid, it's about being true to yourself. Seneca also said, "He is most free who limits himself most." It might sound contradictory, but it's profoundly true. When you clearly define what you allow and what you don't, you free yourself from the emotional chaos others try to impose on you. You no longer need to be available to everyone. You no longer need to be understood by those unwilling to understand. Your peace doesn't depend on others approving your boundaries. It depends on you holding them with dignity. And yes, some people will leave, but don't cry over those losses, Be thankful that your boundaries revealed what your concessions once concealed. Who was truly with you, and who was only there for what they could get from you. A life without boundaries is not compassion, it's self-abandonment. And no one, absolutely no one, is worth betraying yourself again and again. So from today onward, write your invisible lines, not in anger but with clarity, not to hurt but to protect, not to control others but to stop being controlled. Your no might be the first true act of self-love you've experienced in years. And if you feel afraid, remember this. Fear is just a signal that you're crossing the doorway you've always avoided. But on the other side of that door, there is no loneliness. There is peace. Stoic Lesson 4. Do not fear the manipulator's disapproval. One of the most effective forms of emotional manipulation isn't shouted, it's whispered. They don't yell to control you, they show disappointment. They don't impose, they make you feel guilty. They don't push. You're made to believe that you are the problem. And behind all of that, there's a constant, silent, poisonous threat, the fear of disapproval. That fear, even if you won't always admit it, has ruled many of your decisions. You've said yes when you wanted to say no. You've silenced your truth to avoid discomfort. You've endured more than you should have because you believed that enduring was the same as loving or being mature. But Stoicism comes to destroy that lie. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be prepared to be thought foolish and ignorant." He said it because he knew that personal growth rarely pleases others. Growth means making decisions that make uncomfortable those who benefited from your weakness. It often means being rejected by those who claimed to love you, while you were still easy to manipulate. It's hard to accept that the person causing you the most pain might be someone who says they love you. Even harder to realize that their affection was conditional on your obedience. That if you started thinking for yourself, speaking your truth, taking distance, that person would get upset. They'd grow cold, distant, sarcastic, hurt, and you, confused, would begin to doubt yourself. But here comes the shift. A manipulator's disapproval is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that you're finally healing. When you stop pleasing, you stop being useful to the manipulator. They can no longer pull your strings. They can't control you with guilt, with emotional blackmail, with a sad look or punishing silence. And for someone whose power depends on emotionally dominating others, that is intolerable. That's why they'll try to blame you. They'll say you've changed, that you've become cold, that you're no longer the same person. And you know what? They're right. You're no longer the person who tolerated the intolerable, and that's something to celebrate, not mourn. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Stop debating what a good man should be one." That phrase is your compass for when you begin to doubt yourself, because once you start setting boundaries and protecting your peace, many will try to debate your morality, your compassion, your character. Don't play their game. Don't give them the power to redefine who you are, because if you constantly fear others' disapproval, you will be their emotional prisoner forever. Every action will be a strategy to please, not a genuine expression of your being. And that's not living, that's acting. It's performing a role that drains you, crushes you, and disconnects you from yourself. Seneca warned, "No wind is favorable to the man who doesn't know to which port he sails." If your direction depends on others' approval, you will always be adrift. Today they want you to be one thing, tomorrow something else. Today they approve of your assertiveness, tomorrow they call you heartless. You will never be at peace, because your center lies outside of you. It's natural, especially at first, for the fear of disapproval to paralyze you, especially when that fear comes from years of learning that to be loved meant to please, that to be accepted meant to erase parts of yourself. And now, as you try to rebuild, every sign of rejection cuts twice as deep. But you are not alone in this. Many have passed through this fire, through that initial loneliness that arrives when you're no longer useful to those who tried to mold you, through that constant doubt, what if they're right? What if I'm the problem? But each time fear reappears, remember this quote from Epictetus: "The free person is the one who lives according to their own rational will." Not the one who lives to be liked, not the one who lives to be understood, not the one who avoids conflict at all costs, but the one who, amid the noise, chooses their truth. And when the manipulator disapproves of you, look them in the eye, even if only in your mind, and say, "I don't need your approval to exist. I don't need your conditional love. I don't need your permission to be free." The disapproval of someone who wants you small is not a loss. It's a blessing in disguise. And you are not here to be approved of. You are here to be authentic. And if that costs you a few people, it will also give you back something priceless: yourself. Stoic Lesson 5. Observe others' intentions objectively. Emotional manipulation rarely yells. It doesn't arrive with blatant violence or direct threats. It comes subtly, through glances, through soft words disguised as concern, through compliments laced with hidden traps, through prolonged silences that aren't about peace, but punishment. And when you've been exposed to this type of environment for a long time, it's easy to get confused, easy to believe you're overreacting, to think you're the problem, that you should be more understanding, more patient, stronger, more tolerant. But Stoicism doesn't come to make you more submissive. It comes to restore your clarity. Marcus Aurelius insisted, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment about it, and you have the power to revoke that judgment." At first glance, that quote seems to be about managing pain, but it contains a deeper key to freeing yourself from manipulation. Your power lies in the clarity with which you see what is happening. What you don't see controls you, but what you understand frees you. And that's why this lesson begins with an invitation. Pause. Look. Observe calmly. That person who keeps confusing you, are they really caring for you? Or are they shaping your emotions to provoke the reaction they need? That affectionate message, does it come from love or control? Is their concern genuine, or is it a way to keep you under their emotional orbit? Seneca taught that nothing is more dangerous than living asleep, because when you don't see the real intention behind someone's words, you become emotionally blind. You go through life doubting yourself, sensing that something is off, but unable to name it. And that state of confusion is the perfect terrain for any manipulator. That's why Stoicism trains us in objective observation, not to make us cold, but to make us lucid. Imagine for a moment that you're watching a play. There are lights, costumes, drama, but you know it's a play. You're aware it's a performance. And from that awareness, you can either enjoy it or walk out of the theater. The same happens with manipulation. When you stop reacting emotionally and begin to observe rationally, something shifts inside you. You no longer act out of guilt, but out of conviction. You don't accept things to avoid conflict. You evaluate whether they align with your values. And that unsettles the manipulator, because their entire game is emotional. They need you to feel bad, to feel guilty, to feel responsible for their unhappiness. But now that you're observing from the outside, that manipulation loses its grip. Epictetus said, "When someone treats you poorly, remember, they act according to their own perception. Do not respond as though they know better than you." That quote is pure gold, because often the manipulator isn't a malicious genius. They're someone wounded who learned to survive by controlling others. So insecure that they must dominate your emotional world to feel valuable. That doesn't excuse them, but it explains them, and understanding that lets you exit the game without resentment. To observe objectively does not mean to justify. It means to see clearly, and that includes seeing your own part. Why did you allow so much? Why did you keep surrendering? What unhealed wounds are being manipulated? Maybe it's your need for approval, your fear of abandonment, your history with authority figures, your low self-esteem. Not to blame yourself, but to heal yourself, because only when you clearly see the mechanism can you stop it. A classic Stoic metaphor is that of the archer. Marcus Aurelius said that the archer can only control his aim and intention. He can't control the wind or whether the target moves. In the same way, you can't control what others try to do to you. But you can control how you interpret it, how you respond, and whether you even enter their emotional game. And here comes the most important decision of this lesson. Will you keep acting on impulse or on observation? Because if you act from impulse, you stay trapped. Every comment becomes a trigger, every reproach a wound, every silence a nightmare. But if you begin to take emotional distance, if you pause before reacting, you become something no manipulator can dominate, a conscious being. And when you are conscious, you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need revenge. You don't need to humiliate anyone. You just need to see clearly and act from your truth. That is real strength. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that watches and chooses without fear. And in that clarity, your emotional freedom is born. Stoic Lesson 6. Strengthen your emotional autonomy. The day you realize that you emotionally depend on someone who only gives you crumbs is the day your true awakening begins. But that awakening is not glorious. It's bitter, painful, confusing, because when you've been emotionally tied to another's emotions, reactions and validation for so long, starting to break free feels like tearing away a piece of yourself, even if that piece is harming you. Stoicism understood this from its very roots. True freedom begins within, and without emotional autonomy, any other kind of freedom is just an illusion. Seneca said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," and being master of yourself means more than just not crying, not getting angry, or pretending to be strong. It means that your emotions don't depend on how someone else treats you today, that your self-worth doesn't rise or fall based on someone's words or their silence, that your inner balance doesn't collapse because another person is in a bad mood, ignores you, or disappears for hours to punish you. Emotional manipulation needs a foundation to thrive, and that foundation is your dependence. The need to be liked, the fear of rejection, the desire to be accepted at all costs, the craving to be validated, and as long as that craving is alive, the manipulator holds power. Epictetus warned bluntly, "It's not things that disturb us, but our opinion about them." In the context of manipulation, that opinion is often the belief that you need that person, that without their approval, you're worth nothing, that their anger is your fault, that if they make you feel bad, it must be because you did something wrong. And that belief is a prison, an invisible cage that many accept as normal. Because we learned from childhood that being loved means giving in, that if someone loves you, they have the right to be angry with you, to correct you, to make you feel bad for your own good. And that emotional conditioning becomes the perfect breeding ground for confusing love with control in adulthood, care with abusive boundaries, attention with dependence. But Stoicism offers another path, one that doesn't need shouting or confrontation, a quiet, powerful path built from within, your emotional autonomy. Emotional autonomy doesn't mean shutting yourself off from the world. It doesn't mean nothing affects you or that you don't need anyone. It means you can hold yourself up, that when someone leaves, you don't fall apart, that when someone criticizes you, you don't crumble, that when someone tries to manipulate you, you see it and you don't fall for it. Marcus Aurelius put it elegantly, "The soul becomes invincible when it desires nothing outside of itself." What does that mean? That your center must be within you, not in someone else's gestures, not in messages read or unread, not in the response you long for but never receive, not in the apologies that never come. You are responsible for your peace, for your balance, for your worth. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice, awareness, and most of all, time. Emotional autonomy means you stop needing explanations to be at peace. You stop begging for love disguised as patience. You stop becoming an emotional detective, trying to interpret every gesture of someone who plays hide and seek with your feelings. It means simply returning to yourself. But to return to yourself, you need to heal what made you abandon yourself in the first place. Where does your need to please come from? Why is it so hard for you to say no? When did your happiness start depending on others? Seneca stated, "He who is a slave to his emotions will be a slave to others." And that emotional slavery often has deep roots. Absent parents, conditional love, rejection, bullying, emotional neglect. Each experience leaves a mark, and those marks shape how we love. But Stoicism doesn't ask you to erase the past. It asks you to look at it, understand it, and then act freely. The practice of strengthening your emotional autonomy begins with small things, refusing to justify the unjustifiable, not responding immediately to someone who ignores you for days, not chasing after apologies that never come, not seeking validation from someone who offers love only when it suits them. It starts in silence. In the moment, you first choose not to fall, not to react, not to lose your center. And in that moment, something inside you awakens. It's not pride, it's not arrogance, it's dignity. That dignity you may have forgotten, that you buried beneath your fear of being alone, that you sacrificed for a relationship that only worked when you kept giving in. That dignity is the heart of Stoicism, and without it there is no freedom. Emotional autonomy isn't built with motivational quotes. It's built with internal acts, with quiet decisions, with nights when you cry but don't go back, with days when you doubt but don't give in, with moments when you feel alone but don't return to places where you know you'll be hurt. And slowly, that strength becomes a habit, that inner center becomes solid, and then no one manipulates you, no one controls you, because even if the world falls apart, you remain standing. You are free. You are the master of yourself. And that is the greatest Stoic victory. If you've made it this far, it means you're ready to free yourself from those who try to control your emotions. Follow us and comment, "I reclaim my power," to affirm your commitment to a life of autonomy, dignity, and peace. This is just the first step toward leaving behind fear, blackmail, and emotional manipulation. When we reach the 9th lesson, you'll discover a powerful shift that could transform how you relate to others, without losing yourself. Don't miss it. It might be your rebirth. Stoic Lesson 7. You don't owe anyone an explanation if you don't want to give one. There's something more exhausting than direct abuse, the constant need to justify yourself. Sometimes, without realizing it, you live as if you're asking for permission to be yourself. You apologize for not replying right away. You explain why you need space. You defend every decision you make, as if you're in permanent debt to someone who will never grant you peace. And that's where silent control begins, manipulation disguised as conversation, the game of making you feel guilty for acting on your needs instead of someone else's expectations. Epictetus saw this clearly and taught it without flinching. If you want to improve, be prepared to be laughed at, insulted, and rejected. If you choose this path, do not try to please them, seek to please yourself. When someone emotionally manipulates you, their first goal is control, but their second goal is to make you justify your resistance, because the moment you start explaining yourself, you're already giving up ground. This doesn't mean you can't have respectful conversations. It means you are not obligated to explain yourself to someone who doesn't listen, only accuses, to someone who doesn't ask to understand, but to manipulate, to someone who's not interested in you, but only in maintaining control. There are people who ask, "Why did you do that?" But what they really mean is, you had no right to do that. When you learn to say no without guilt, "I don't want to," without hesitation, and "I've decided this," without offering 20 reasons for approval, something shifts inside you. You reclaim your space. Your silence becomes a statement. Your decision, a sacred boundary. But it's not easy, because if you've been in relationships where you had to justify every emotion, every gesture, every change, giving a firm answer without explanation might feel aggressive. You might feel like you're being selfish, cold, or even cruel. but the truth is you're being free. Stoicism teaches that our decisions need no embellishment or defense, that living according to reason and principle is enough, that anyone who needs to manipulate you will always ask for more than you give, and always question what you choose. Seneca once said, "He who seeks to please everyone ends up not pleasing himself." And in that endless effort to explain yourself, to be understood by someone who only wants to control you, you slowly empty yourself. Every time you justify why you distanced yourself from someone who harmed you, every time you explain why you didn't reply right away to someone who only responds when they feel like it, every time you feel like you need permission to be who you are, you lose a piece of your integrity. So, how do you practice this principle? With quiet firmness, with silences that aren't punishment, but protection, with brief, direct responses. That doesn't feel right to me. I don't want to talk about it. I don't need to explain. And yes, that will upset them, because the manipulator is uncomfortable without a foothold. They feed on your justifications. They twist them, weaponize them, use them to make you doubt, to blame you. But when you don't give them that ground, when you don't open that door, when you stay calm and offer no justification, the game ends. There's nowhere to attack, no arguments to twist, no excuses to dismantle. There's only your decision, your space, your center, and that, in Stoic language, is virtue in motion. It is living from the logos, from calm reason, from a clarity that needs no shouting or convincing, only affirmation. Marcus Aurelius said, "When you speak, speak only what is necessary. When you're silent, let it be to preserve your peace." And sometimes preserving your peace means not engaging in hollow discussions, not responding to provocations disguised as concern, not justifying every move like you need permission to exist. Modern society has made over-explaining look like empathy, but often it isn't. Often it's fear, anxiety, a need for approval, and the manipulator can smell it, they detect it, and they use it. That's why this Stoic lesson isn't an invitation to become closed off. It's an invitation to reclaim your right to silence, to brevity, to decision without guilt, because your life does not need to be explained to be valid, and those who truly respect you won't demand justifications. They will listen, they will respect, and if they disagree, they will do so with the same respect. Everything else is control, and you didn't come to this session to keep handing over your freedom on a silver platter. You came to take it back. You came to remind yourself that no one has the right to demand explanations that hurt you, that pressure you, that drain you. Today, you return to yourself, and you do it in silence. Stoic Lesson 8. Practice emotional detachment. There's a very subtle trap that makes you an easy target for emotional manipulation, depending on the affection of those who don't offer it in a healthy way. And it's so common, so silent, that even strong, intelligent and brave people fall into it, because manipulation doesn't always scream, it doesn't always hit, it doesn't always show. Sometimes emotional manipulation presents itself as affection, as concern, as a clumsy form of love. It disguises itself in phrases like, "I just care too much about you. If you really loved me, you wouldn't do that. After everything I've done for you." And you, with your heart open, with the intention to love and build something real, believe you have to repay it with obedience, that you must give in, explain, adapt, endure, until one day you realize that the love you give leaves you empty, that giving has become a surrender of yourself, that you're more focused on not upsetting the other person than on listening to your own voice. And that's where Stoicism enters. Marcus Aurelius said, "Do not tie your heart to anything you cannot let go of in peace, not as a sign of coldness, but of freedom. Because any bond that can't exist without manipulation isn't love. It's a prison disguised as affection." Emotional detachment does not mean indifference. It means loving without dependence, being present without being absorbed, caring without that care turning into submission. But achieving this takes deep inner work, because many of us were taught that our worth lies in what others say about us, that self-esteem is earned through external approval, that to be loved means someone chooses us, even if they don't respect us. And so we begin to confuse love with excessive sacrifice, with anxiety to please, with fear of losing. Epictetus warned bluntly, "He who depends on what others think is not free." And what does an emotional manipulator do? They cling to that dependency. They feed it. They strengthen it, because they know that as long as you care more about their opinion than your peace, they have power over you. So how do you cultivate emotional detachment? It begins with an uncomfortable truth. You need less than you think. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to please someone who's never satisfied. You only need connection with yourself. Detachment is born from a powerful source, self-knowledge. When you know who you are, what you deserve, what you want, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate, you stop seeking validation. And when you stop seeking validation, the invisible chains of emotional control break. Seneca stated, "The greatest wealth is to be content with little." And that also applies to affection, because you don't need a mountain of manipulative attention. You just need healthy bonds, coherent ones, without blackmail or psychological games. But to get there, you must be willing to let go. Let go of the need to be liked. Let go of the habit of justifying yourself. Let go of the attachment to the approval of those who hurt you. And that hurts, because many times the manipulator is someone you care about, someone who once held you close, who made you feel seen, who promised you eternal love. But promises mean nothing without action, and nostalgia must never become an excuse to keep surrendering your freedom. Marcus Aurelius also said, "Your mind becomes what you think. Guard your thoughts, and you guard your soul." If you constantly think that you can't live without that person, your mind becomes enslaved. If you believe that walking away will leave you forever alone, your soul shrinks. But if you begin to think clearly, "I can love and still protect myself. I can care and still set boundaries. I can want someone and still choose to walk away," then something transforms. Emotional detachment makes you strong without turning your heart to stone. It gives you firmness without making you hard. It allows you to say, "I care about you, but not at any cost." And that, dear listener of this session, is a form of love so powerful that those who used to manipulate you no longer know how to catch you. Because emotional blackmail loses its power when you're no longer afraid of being alone. Because control collapses when you no longer seek approval. Because love becomes free when there are no chains of dependence. Can you see how profound this is? You're no longer a leaf carried by the winds of others' emotions. You're now a tree with roots deep in your own dignity. And though it hurts to let go of someone who manipulates you, it hurts more to live in chains. Today, you return to yourself, and from that place, everything changes. If this lesson is awakening the strength in you to put an end to emotional manipulation, subscribe and become part of this space where we cultivate inner strength, mental clarity, and healthy relationships. Here, you'll learn to protect your peace, reclaim your power, and live with authenticity. Stoic Lesson 9. Be aware of your vulnerabilities. One of the most invisible, yet most effective ways someone can manipulate you is by taking advantage of your unresolved emotional wounds. And this is no coincidence. Manipulators don't act randomly. They observe, they analyze, they detect with surgical precision that weak point you've barely been able to acknowledge yourself, and they slip through it. They control you from what you have not yet healed. That's why this Stoic lesson is so uncomfortable and so necessary. Seneca put it bluntly, "No one can hurt you as deeply as what you haven't understood about yourself." Do you want to free yourself from emotional manipulation? Then you must first dare to look at yourself honestly, to see where you are vulnerable without judgment or guilt, to stop sweeping under the rug all that still hurts so that others cannot use those parts of you against you. Because if you don't know where your wounds are, someone else will, and they'll use them. Are you afraid of abandonment? They'll make you feel guilty every time you try to walk away. Do you struggle with setting boundaries? They'll overwhelm you with demands disguised as affection. Do you carry a deep wound of rejection? They'll manipulate you through their approval. And just like that, without realizing it, you start to lose yourself. You say yes when you want to say no. You stay silent when you should speak. You give up your will out of fear of being alone, of seeming selfish, of not being enough. But here, Stoicism becomes medicine straight to the soul. Epictetus said, "As long as you don't understand why you act the way you do, you'll be a slave to your impulses and to the desires of others." Do you see it now? It's not just about setting boundaries outwardly. It's about knowing yourself inwardly. It's about looking with compassion at your cracks and understanding that they are not flaws, but uncultivated spaces. That instead of hiding them, you can strengthen them. That instead of fearing them, you can transform them into practical wisdom. Here begins your most courageous work, to explore what others have used to dominate you and turn it into the core of your power. How do you do that? Start with a deep question. What still hurts that I haven't faced? And answer it without embellishment, without excuses, without fear. Maybe you'll find a childhood marked by insecurity, or past relationships that made you feel you were only worthy if you pleased, or the need to feel needed by someone in order to feel deserving of love. Whatever the root is, observe it with serenity. Seneca taught, "What you don't face, you repeat." And if you don't become aware of your wound, you'll keep running into people who trigger it. But if you see it, if you understand it, if you take responsibility, no one will be able to manipulate you from that place again. Because self-knowledge is the end of other people's control. It's the beginning of a freedom that grows from within. And no, it's not easy. Sometimes looking inside hurts more than enduring what's outside. But that's where true healing lives. Because breaking free from manipulation doesn't start with the other person. It starts with you, with how you treat yourself, with how you understand yourself, with how you accompany yourself in your vulnerability. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Perfect tranquility comes when the soul is in order." And there is no order if you ignore your wounds, if you don't understand why you break down at certain moments, if you punish yourself for reacting or for not knowing how to defend yourself. This is the moment to make a different decision. Instead of seeking protection outside, build refuge within. Instead of waiting for others to take care of you, begin to care for yourself. Instead of depending on someone not to manipulate you, learn from which part of you you're allowing it. Because when someone can no longer press your inner buttons, they lose their power. And when you know exactly where your fragile spots are, they start to strengthen. Emotional manipulation is skilled at disguise, but it cannot survive clarity. And clarity is born of deep self-awareness. This 9th Stoic lesson is not here to make you feel guilty about your vulnerabilities. It's here to help you see them, to honor them, to work with them bravely, because only those who know themselves protect themselves, and only those who protect themselves are truly free. Stoic Lesson 10. Emotional distance is healthy and necessary. There are moments in life when the greatest act of self-love is walking away, not with shouting, not with hatred, not with revenge, but walking away in silence, with firmness, with dignity, especially when you've tried everything, when you gave second chances, when you spoke clearly, when you were patient, empathetic, understanding, and still you're emotionally manipulated. You still feel drained, confused, guilty for things you didn't do, trapped in dynamics where your emotional freedom is sacrificed to preserve peace with someone who refuses to change. Epictetus made it clear, he is not free who depends on the conduct of others. And if your emotional peace depends on someone else stopping their manipulation, then you're not free. You're in an invisible but very real prison. A prison that steals your energy, your self-worth, your joy for life. That's why this lesson is one of the hardest, but also one of the most liberating. Stoicism doesn't teach you to become emotionally cold. It teaches you to protect your soul, to not give it away to someone who doesn't know how to care for it, to build an invisible but firm wall between your peace and someone else's toxicity. Because sometimes the problem isn't that someone wants to manipulate you. The problem is that you keep exposing yourself, hoping that person will change, will understand, will wake up one day. But that's not love, that's self-abandonment. Marcus Aurelius said, "Your soul becomes dyed with the color of your thoughts." So what are you becoming by constantly focusing your attention on someone who manipulates you? Someone afraid to speak up so as not to upset them? Someone who takes the blame for everything just to avoid conflict? Someone who silences their own needs just to avoid being labeled selfish? If that's the case, you need distance, emotional, physical, mental, if possible, not as punishment, not out of contempt, but as a declaration of respect for yourself. Because no one who truly loves you would want you to lose yourself just to preserve the relationship. And sometimes that person who manipulates you is someone very close. A father, a mother, a partner, a child, a longtime friend. That makes it harder, but not any more justified. Epictetus stated, "It is better to walk alone in truth than to walk with others in lies." And a relationship based on emotional control, constant guilt, and the need to justify every choice is a lie disguised as connection. Emotional distance doesn't mean you don't love. It means you choose to love yourself too. It means you prioritize your clarity, your mental health, your inner stability. It means you stop trying to change the other person and begin taking care of yourself. What does that distance look like? Sometimes it means not responding immediately. Sometimes it means not entering a conversation you know will end in guilt. Sometimes it means not justifying your silence or your decision to leave. Sometimes it means not coming back. You don't need drama, you only need conviction and inner strength, because manipulation feeds on unlimited access to your emotional world. When someone knows exactly how to make you feel bad and knows you'll still let them in time after time, then they have no incentive to change. But when that door starts to close, when you understand that your well-being is non-negotiable, when you no longer react, no longer explain, no longer justify, the game ends and you return to yourself. Seneca summed it up with wisdom. The greatest wealth is to live in tranquility, and no one has the right to steal that from you. This Stoic lesson isn't about becoming cold, it's about reclaiming your inner warmth. The warmth that fades little by little when you live in constant reaction to someone else. When your life revolves around not upsetting them, not disappointing them, not creating conflict. That is not a free life. That is a life ruled by fear, and you are not here to keep being afraid. You are here to transform, to rebuild, to choose yourself. Emotional distance is your sacred space. It is your territory. It is your invisible shield. It is what protects your progress, your process, your balance. It's not selfishness. It's maturity. It's emotional intelligence. If someone makes you feel guilty for needing that distance, that's precisely the proof that you needed it. Because someone who truly loves you respects your space. Someone who wants the best for you doesn't need to manipulate you to stay. And if someone only remains close when they can control you, then that's not love, that's use. Today, Stoicism offers you this raw and powerful truth. Peace is also built with absence, with silence, with closed doors, with necessary goodbyes. Not out of malice, but out of self-respect, out of dignity, out of freedom. You made it this far. You listened word by word, and that, though you may not realize it yet, already sets you apart, because most people don't want to see. Most people deny, minimize, justify. They'd rather keep giving in, keep adapting, keep shrinking, than admit that someone who loves them can also manipulate them. But you didn't. You dared to listen, and by doing so, you sparked a flame. This wasn't just a lesson, it was a mirror. And if something made you uncomfortable during this session, if something stirred you inside, it's because we touched something real. Perhaps for the first time, you understood that the problem is not you, that you're not crazy for feeling confused, guilty, trapped. That emotional manipulation doesn't always shout, but it always hurts. And it hurts deeply because it comes from someone who was supposed to protect you. No one prepares you for that. For the person you love most to also be the one with the most power to hurt you, for their words to become cages, for their love to become currency, for your emotional freedom to depend on their moods. And the worst part is that, over time, you start to normalize it. You begin to think it's your fault, that you're not doing enough, that if you just changed yourself, everything would be okay. That's the most dangerous trap, making you believe you're choosing when you're actually obeying. But Stoicism came to remind you of something different. Epictetus showed you that true freedom begins when you stop reacting and start choosing. Seneca taught you that your worth doesn't depend on how you're treated, but on how you hold yourself. Marcus Aurelius whispered to you that your inner peace is sacred, and that anyone who robs you of it does not deserve to stay. Applying these ideas is not easy. This isn't theory. It's courage. It's looking in the mirror and saying, no more. No more silences that suffocate you. No more guilt for choosing yourself. No more fear of disapproval. The day you stop asking for permission to be yourself, that's the day your real life begins. Painful? Yes. Lonely at first? Possibly. Liberating? Always. This session wasn't meant to offer you magical solutions, because no one can tell you exactly what to do, but it can help you wake up. And if you've reached the end, you've already taken the most important step. You've decided to stop normalizing what's destroying you. Maybe you still don't know what to do next. Maybe you still have doubts. Maybe you're still afraid, but inside you, something has already changed. And that change is irreversible. Now you know you deserve more. Now you know your peace is non-negotiable. Now you know your dignity is not in anyone else's hands. From this point on, what you do with this awareness is entirely up to you. And if you need guidance on that journey, a place to remind yourself of your worth, a community where you can learn to live with wisdom, strength, and authenticity, then subscribing is not just a click. It's a symbolic act, a promise, a declaration that you will no longer lose yourself in other people's emotional shadows, that you are ready to move forward, to build healthy boundaries, to speak with clarity, to stop giving in out of fear. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being conscious. It's about no longer being a victim. It's about reclaiming your power. And if this session spoke to your soul, make it clear. Comment, "My peace is no longer negotiable." Make that phrase your mantra, your shield, your compass. And if you ever begin to doubt again, return to this session, because here you didn't just find words. You found a part of yourself that no longer wants to stay silent. Thank you for staying until the end. Now your true beginning starts. Follow us if this content resonates with you and your values. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and uplifts our community, shaping the identity of our shared Stoic path. The comment with the most support will be pinned as a banner of this community of Stoic minds, a community that does not run from pain but walks through it, with courage, with wisdom, with honor. To enter this Stoic community is to break the chains that limit you, and to build an inner fortress no one can tear down. Follow us if you never want to miss another Stoic insight again. Remember, every decision shapes your character. In the pinned comment, you'll find 2 paths, each there for a reason. There are decisions that seem small but change everything. If something inside you shifted during this session, don't let it slip away. Subscribing isn't just a click, it's a decision to stop living asleep, to walk with awareness, with courage, with purpose. And if you choose to support this space as a member, you're not giving, you're planting. Thanks to you, this flame doesn't go out. Your presence allows us to keep sharing wisdom in a noisy world. to keep building a community of awakened, grounded, and free souls. We'll see you in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we'll continue exploring the deep riches of Stoic wisdom in modern life. Until we meet again, remember, you are the only master of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible,